all here tonight, especially when the weather is so lovely. Let's clap for spring. Okay, now I gotta talk. So welcome to Nerd Nite. Today is Thursday, March 13th at 7 p.m. So first, let's thank some people. First of all, I want to thank you all for being here. I'll clap for that too. Oh, just a little light clap. Just a little light clap, not a big clap. We also want to give a thank you to Live for hosting us. We love being here. Thank you guys so much. And then let me introduce and also thank our speakers for the evening. We have John Hyder. His presentation is called You'll Shudder to Learn the Origin of Your Phone's Shutter Sound, which that scratches a part of my brain I didn't know needed to be scratched. I want to learn that. Also, Tan Lai, From Lead to Gold, How Alchemy and Computer Wizardry Create Better Drugs. Whew. And we have Rich Reddy, who's going to talk about Billboard Bandits. Now, he's a part of Ann Arbor District Library as well, so we're really excited to have him too. Can we clap for them all again? I love clapping so much. Now, before all that, y'all got to sit here and listen to me. This is your Nerd Nite Minute. Yeah. Oh, your Nerd Nite Minute. Yeah. Okay, so I recently got into Alfred Hitchcock movies. I didn't know what it was all about, but my friend was like, you should start watching them. So I started watching them, and I started to notice that all of the female characters, or at least the ones that are like interesting and nice, are all blonde. And I thought to myself, that I remember the phrase Hitchcock blonde. That's a thing, right? So I'm like, let me investigate this further for tonight's Nerd Nite Minute. So yeah, in his movies, there's a character archetype. We see here Miss Eva St. Marie from North by Northwest. We got Grace Kelly, Rear Window, Dial M for Murder. We got Tippi Hedren. These are blonde women, a very specific color blonde. But in his films, these women are often affluent, but aloof. And there's something underneath. They present as one way, but they're more clever than you think. Or turns out they're a spy. Or turns out they're something else. So I was talking to my friend who's actually a doctor of film. I'm like, what is this all about? And he's like, you just got to look up the quote. So my question was answered really fast because guess what? Alfred told us why he loves blondes. Buckle up. I think the most interesting women sexually, are the English women. I feel that the English women, the Swedes, and the Northern Germans, what? And Scandinavians are a great deal more exciting than the Latin, the Italian, and the French women. Sex should not be advertised. An English girl looking like a school teacher is apt, I don't want to read this, is apt to get into a cab with you, and to your surprise, she'll probably pull a man's pants open. He said that, he told us. In 1960, he was like, I'm gonna tell myself, I'm gross. So my reaction to that was, ew. Ugh. Yuck. But let's pry a little bit deeper here. Basically, he's like, I'm like white women, I fetishize white women. He doesn't even see or consider women of color. And also, if you're able to get a suntan, he's like, you're a whore. Which I can get a suntan. So it's just gross misogynist. There's yucky yuck. Ew. So he works in the thriller genre, right? And the thriller genre, basically, like, things are one way, but it appears somewhere, the reality is different, right? Surprise endings, twists, we know the thriller genre. And that also, a layer of that is the women characters in his films. This is a very cool film historian. You guys already probably read this. But it was the seemingly unending process of withholding and receiving, the same game of hide and seek layered within his movies, that was his turn on. The blonde woman is a school teacher, but it turns out she will do something in the car. I don't know. So that's one film critic's kind of look into how the Hitchcock blonde is just a part of the whole Hitchcock moment. And we can see that in this is probably my favorite Hitchcock movie. It's probably everybody's, right? Vertigo. So if you don't know, the lady on the right is pretending to be the lady on the left. And the lady on the left has very naturalistic makeup. She has lovely blonde hair. I would even say her skin is a little bit paler than the real her. And you can see she's wearing gray and white. However, Miss Judy has big eyebrows, big jewelry, polka dots. She got some makeup on. She got the Ariana Grande spray tan. And so you see how it's different, right? And in the movie, Madeline is amazing. Madeline is the coolest lady to ever be a lady. But when she's revealed to be Judy, she talks differently. She's from a different socioeconomic status. You can tell that Hitchcock really loves Madeline and does not like Judy. So Edith Head is a costume designer. She said working for Hitchcock was a lesson in restraint or an education in restraint. He preferred to use natural colors, garish colors, because to be overtly anything doesn't turn him on. He wants you to look boring on the outside, because on the inside, you're a crazy lady. Unless it calls for it in the script, right? And we can see her beautiful costume designs here. But we'll notice that it's these naturalistic colors. Even when Eva St. Marie is going out to the gala ball in North by Northwest, she's still covered here, right? She might have a V in the back, but the dress is a conservative length. There's some restraint there. Even with Miss Grace Kelly in the center, she's going out for the night, but she's not giving Judy from Vertigo. There's this level of class, or what Alfred Hitchcock wants us to think is classy or whatever. So this is a very cursory dive into the world of Hitchcock and the Hitchcock blonde. I want to remind you guys that the man who said all that looks like this. And I don't like making fun of the way that people look, because that's not nice. But he was saying some crazy stuff about the way other people look. Sir, I'm not getting in that car, and I'm not touching your pants, sir. But I guess I'm not a Hitchcock blonde. Or am I? Could I be? I don't know. For anybody who's a big Hitchcock fan, I'm so sorry. I didn't really believe, no, let me rephrase that. I wanted to know for sure if he was fetishizing women in this way. Did he make these movies to do this to women? And the answer is yes. He treated the actresses like shit. He terrorized them. There's horror stories from these women. And if you need any more proof, see the movie Frenzy. It's one of the last movies he made, and it's in the 70s, so you can show like nudity and violence. And that shut me up. I'm like, man. But then we have to ask ourselves, can we hate the man and love the art? Sometimes. I don't really know. This one was really tough. But anyways, that's what I had to say. Yay! Okay, so without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker for the evening. John Hyder is a 37-year veteran. Let me go low. I can't read this. Is a 37-year veteran of the photography business, having started in the days of 35mm film in dark rooms, and now uses exclusively digital technology as he got tired of breathing the corrosive fumes of film developers. Due to that excessive chemical exposure, he now believes that birds are AI generated and that his cat, Pickle, is the duly elected next president of the United States. Let's give a round of applause for John.
All right. I note the prediction on my cat being president was written 3 months ago, so I think I was a little bit wrong. Good evening, and I guess I have to start this bad boy up. We're going to talk about the 45-year-old origin of the iconic and ridiculously often heard iPhone camera sound effect. Let's go. Or is my subheading is a reminder of the analog past and our digital present. That's by me, John Hyder. That's the guy behind the camera. However, while you guys look at some quick fun facts about me, I'm going to give you a quick, if you can read this, it's a PSA, it's a public service announcement on the PSA, which is the prostate-specific antigen. Okay, so hands up guys in the room who are 55 years or older or who hope to get to 55 one day. Hopefully that's come on, get your hands up. All right, promise me this, that you will get a prostate-specific antigen blood test. They're real simple, and what they can do is they show the presence of potential cancer in your prostate. I had this done twice last summer. It was confirmed with a biopsy that I had prostate cancer. That was in September, and just 7 weeks ago, I had my prostate completely removed. Here I am standing in front of you. I'm doing okay. It is, thank you, yeah. Give it up for the prostate cancer. So prostate cancer is highly curable and treatable if you get to it early. Something like 15% of all men in their lifetimes will develop prostate cancer. And if you ignore it, you can wind up with a condition the American Medical Association calls not living. So please, guys, just do it. 55, once you hit 55, maybe a little bit earlier if you have a history of cancer in your family. Okay, that's the end of the PSA. And I got that cleared. I was told I could do that. Any questions about the facts about me? We'll talk about them later. All right, now for something completely trivial. So way back in the late 80s, there's a sound engineer named Jim Reeks. He was creating sound effects for the Apple Computer Company. And there's Jim. He's wearing that hot little yellow muscle shirt. And that's apparently how nerds dressed in the 80s. Reeks was creating a bunch of different sound effects for the first generation of the Macintosh computers. Here's a fun little quick diversion. So in the early days of Apple Computer, Steve Jobs was contacted by the lawyers of the Beatles, whose record label was also called Apple. They told him they didn't want Apple computers to be making any music or tunes. And he said, fine, that's cool, we're not going to do that. In those days, they weren't making music. Jim Reeks heard about this. I'm sure every sound engineer did. And he thought it was kind of silly that all he could do was create little beeps and boops and alerts. So he put something on the Apple alert system that's, oh shit, that's there to this day. You might not be able to read it. It's called Sosumi. And it was Jim Reeks basically saying, Apple, you know, if the Beatles lawyers don't like it, what I'm creating, if I'm creating some music, you know, or some tunes, Sosumi. I thought it was brilliant. It was wonderful. So he, one of the first well-known sound effects that he created was a startup sound for the Apple computers as they booted up. The startup Reeks used was the final musical chord of the Beatles tune, A Day in the Life, which I just realized recently is genius. He's basically saying, screw you, Beatles. So we're going to hear that right now. Oh, that's good and loud. All right, so that was the end of the Beatles' A Day in the Life. So what Reeks said he wanted to do was create a Zen palette cleanser to make Apple computer users forget they were restarting their computers because they just lost a bunch of data, which happened a lot. So to evoke the Beatles tune, Reeks played a C major chord on that keyboard right there, and sneaked it into the Apple sound effect. So again, this is the boot up sound he created, which you're probably familiar with. Yeah. Let's go back. I'm sorry. Let's hear that again. Okay, let's not go back. Okay, so he was skilled at creating a bunch of sounds that would stand the test of time. That boot up sound that we just heard is still part of many Macintosh computers. In fact, my MacBook Pro, which is about 8 years old now, still has that startup sound that Reeks created. So before we get to what is one of the most heard sound effects that he created, let's figure out why these sound effects on our computers and smartphones are so iconic and meaningful. So there are a bunch of, so Reeks' most well-known or heard creation, there are a number of sound effects that are part of our current modern lives, even though their technologies are no longer widely used. Yeah, if your eyes are tired, don't worry, I'll read this for you because I can't memorize all this shit. So I'd call them anachronistic sound moments because they signify a memory or understanding of a technology that, even if it's rarely used or no longer around. So like, give you an example. What sound does this effect, what does this sound effect remind you of? A little loud. So that was the well-known, maybe, teletype machine. Teletypes were used all the way from the late 1800s well through the 1900s to get news and information to newspapers, radio stations. And in fact, here's one fun fact. There's a radio station in Philadelphia. It's called KYW. I used to listen to it all the time because I lived in Philadelphia. That continued to use the sound of teletype machines in its radio broadcasts long after they'd unplugged those machines, because I think they thought, this is what people are expecting. This is what they associate with news. How about this sound effect? Even though this technology is, it's not very widely used these days, it still evokes a certain memory. Sorry, that was a bit tough. That, of course, is the sound of the needle scratching on the LP record. And for me, it kind of signifies, hold on, whoa, stop, everything, something's gone off the rails. Then there's, how about this sound effect or the sound that's about 30 years old. Does it still mean something to us, even though it's not widely used anymore? Wait, there's more. All right, of course, that is the early dial-up internet sound. So for many, it signifies getting on the internets, or the interwebs, as we old people call it. That brings us to Reek's most well-known, or at least heard, sound effect for both Apple Computer and the iPhone. In the late 80s, Reeks was tasked with creating a sound for taking screenshots on Macintosh computers using the iOS. Since users would be taking a photo of the text and graphics on the computer screen, Reeks used an actual film camera recorded to indicate that a screenshot was being captured. Reeks says he chose to create a digital file of the sound his Canon AE-1 made when its shutter was pressed for the Mac's screenshot. Let's listen to that now. That is the sound that iPhones make to this day. Well, anyway, Jim Reeks created that. So the Canon AE-1 was one of the most popular cameras of the late 70s and well into the 80s. 6 million of them were produced, and it had this vertically traveling and notably squeaky sounding shutter system, and this was also important, a mirror. When the mirror flipped up and down, it was noted for making a lot of noise on that particular camera. Oh, so now here's where I pick up my Canon AE-1 and fire it up. Does that sound a little familiar? Maybe it does. To me, it sounds a lot like the sound that Jim Reeks turned into the Macintosh computer's screenshot sound, but also the iPhone shutter sound. All right. Reeks used his own Canon AE-1 to create Apple's iconic screenshot and iPhone camera shutter sound. The fact that he could do that, create an exact sound from the Canon camera made that's weird to this day is created just by, it's made possible by this fact: Canon never thought to trademark its sound. If they had, Apple Computer would owe them a buttload of money. So for me, personally, I like to think that the iPhone camera shutter sound effect is a comfort, as I intrinsically like an auditory confirmation that a photo is being taken. Some people don't. So for me, it reminds me of an era when there were mechanical cameras, like the Canon AE-1 with its noisy and well-known mechanics. Many digital cameras these days are essentially silent. You can take photos with your iPhone or with digital cameras, digital professional cameras that are essentially silent. And I say, what's the fun about that? One controversy began about 8 years ago when Reeks first talked about how he created the iPhone shutter sound effect. This was in an interview that's on YouTube. After seeing Reeks' interview, there were a lot of camera nerds who piped up and said that Jim Reeks' sound effect couldn't have been just the camera, that it was the camera plus that motor drive that you just heard. And people wrote in about that, you know. However, one commentator identifying themselves as Reeks shot down that theory in a response. So you see, here's Jim Reeks' name. Don't know if it's actually him, but he's saying he did not use a power winder. He simply slowed down the shutter speed to extend the duration of the sound. And also, when he made the recording, he said his camera had been on the shelf for about 5 years, so it probably was sounding like the gears needed some lubrication. More possible confirmation. Oops, one of my slides went away. But anyway, there was another person wrote in on this forum who worked on Canon cameras, saying that they were well known for having a lot of squeal and a lot of noise, especially the older they got. However, for many photographers, including myself, the sound effect Reeks created sounds suspiciously like a motor-driven film camera, and we'll never know unless we can get Jim Reeks to show up to a Nerd Nite with the specific camera that he used and recreate it. Maybe I'll reach out to him in a bit and find out if he can do that. It's estimated that 5.3 billion photos are taken on a day, every day with iPhones, and if they're taken with the shutter sound on, you're hearing Jim Reeks' Canon AE1 over and over and over again. Oh man, this slide got messed up. Okay, I'll tell you what it's saying. So here's a fun fact about why the iPhone camera sound cannot be muted. There's a lot of text in the middle here that's gone. So in Japan, you cannot mute your iPhone shutter sound. If you take a photo, it has to be audible, and they do that to go so that surreptitious public photos cannot be taken, in particular upskirt photos like that I illustrated it there. So in Japan, every time you take a photograph, you hear that shutter sound, or you have to hear some of it. And that's a Japanese law. That was a tip given to me by a professor here at the University of Michigan. And that is it. I just burned through that lecture, and yeah. That's it. I'm sorry. What? Oh, sure, yeah. If there are any questions.
Repeat the question in the microphone.
I will repeat the question. Any questions? Yes, Bill. Sorry.
Could you fire the shutter without the drive?
Oh, right. Oh, good point. I should have done that. I don't know if we're going to be able to hear it because this. Oh, sorry. The request is to hear this camera without the motor drive to see if what Jim Reeks is saying.
Use a long shutter.
Oh, I am.
Do you want me to hold the mic so you have two hands?
Sure. Does it seem to me that this is the sound I think we know. But again, I mean, Jim Reeks says that it was just the film camera.
I think your batteries are a little low at the drive.
It was a drive that I bought on eBay for $30. Any other questions? Because I know that was so darn. Okay. Oh, another photo nerd. Yes, sir.
I brought another version of the same camera, but I did once own a Canon AE1, and there is an issue with the lubricant drying out on the mirror pivot.
Yep.
So when the mirror goes up, it goes.
Yep. Okay, so this is a gentleman who owns a similar model to this Canon camera, and he says it is well known that as they age, as the mirror, if you know, single lens reflex cameras have mirrors to reflect the image up into the viewfinder. As they age, they begin to make that squeal. So perhaps Jim Reeks is correct. Yes, sir.
I had a Canon that sat on a shelf for close to 20 years, and it sounded a lot like what Reeks recorded.
Oh, okay. So we're getting confirmation. So it sounds like there's a lot of confirmation that is just the film camera without the power winder.
I'm not buying it.
So let that camera sit on a shelf for 20 years.
And was anyone amazed that my algebra teacher's brother my algebra teacher sister is Meryl Streep's. Did you guys see that fun fact? In junior high, Meryl Streep was my algebra teacher's sister. Anyway, that's it. All right, thank you, ladies. Unless there's any other questions? No, you just want me to get rid of me? All right, I gotta...
Thank you so much, John. I also love, I did not put together all the people who I saw come in with cameras tonight. It's now all explained. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. You can all continue the debate about whether you think that it did really come from this camera, because I think we could have a really good one going here. But anyhow, we'll see you back here at 7:35. Refresh your drink, and we'll see you soon. I'd like you to join me in welcoming Tan Lai. Tan is a fourth-year biophysics graduate student who loves frogs, cooking for people, and learning Spanish. Tan also wrote a really funny bio with a lot of Spanish in it, so I'm not going to read that bit out loud. But this is a little plug that, if you sign up for our mailing list, you get the speakers' topics and their funny bios, because we do encourage them to put little jokes in them ahead of time. And then you're also reminded a few days before Nerd Night. But if you missed it, you can also just go to our website and read Tan's funny bio. But in addition to all the Spanish jokes, he also he wanted for a time to be a lab chemist, but now does all of his work on a computer and is not a danger to his environment since. So if you want to learn how he was a danger to his environment, I don't know, go to our website or ask him on break. But join me now in learning how you go from being a lab scientist to doing your work on computers, and welcome Tan Lai.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you for the kind introduction. A hint for how I ended up being a lab chemist, a computer chemist, is that it involves E. coli, it involves a lot of contamination, and it involves a kitchen sink, and a lot of yelling. And I was a freshman too. But anyways, yeah, so I'm now sequestered into the computational chemistry life. But that's okay, because I like this way better, okay? So anyways, my name is Tan. I am a fourth-year biophysics graduate student from the Brooks Group at University of Michigan. And today I'm going to be telling you guys something that has fascinated me since undergrad after the E. coli incident. It is actually how we use alchemy and computer wizardry to create better drugs, and hopefully I can convince you guys of this. Maybe you guys aren't convinced, we'll see. But before this, I want to ask you guys a few questions. All right, so does anyone recognize these weird looking symbols? Yes? I heard a yes, okay, because I don't. I just took it from Google. Sir, the one that said yes, where did you recognize from?
I'm an old chemist.
You are?
A very old chemist.
Okay, nice. Very cool. Well, are you as old as, what's up?
What did he say?
He said that he is a very old chemist, but I think these symbols are from the 1500s. I'm not sure. But okay, well, I only recognize the first four, but surely everyone recognized it, apparently. But sure, you guys maybe recognize this, right? Harry Potter. I recognize it. Most people should. And for all of those people that indulge in more Japanese media, maybe you recognize this instead. Full Metal Alchemist. I've never watched it. I heard it's very, 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 very good. Still haven't watched it. It's on Netflix. So what do all of this basically have in common, right? It's basically the fact that alchemy, magic, and wizardry is just kind of prevalent in our childhoods, and I guess we can all have share this similar connection, right? And so, in fact, alchemy was considered a science, and sir, I don't think you were practicing alchemy back then.
I tried to turn lots things into gold.
He tried to turn a lot of things into gold.
And that for a long time.
I see. Well, that would have caused massive inflation if we were able to turn everything into gold, but I think you'll like what we'll be doing here. Okay, so, so alchemy was considered an actual science, and it was practiced in China, Europe, India, and the Islamic world at various points in ancient history, right? And so the methods of alchemy included a lot of cool things, but I'll just pick three. One of them is magic, obviously. Second one is a little sprinkling of divine intervention. And the third one has to do something with the phases of the moon. And with all of these divine intervention, magic, and phases of the moon, alchemists, they have a very long Christmas list of what they want to create with all of these cool methods they have. One of them is the elixir of immortality, which obviously grants immortality. The next one is what the gentleman was trying to do, which is the philosopher's stone, the ability to transform anything into gold, which again would cause an economic breakdown. And so, and if this wasn't already like a hefty wish Christmas list that Santa would never ever grant. They wanted even more than that. They wanted the ability to create perpetually burning lamps, develop the ability to revive the dead plants in your office, create malleable glass, something about producing a miniature yet fully formed human being, and of course a fire-breathing unicorn, which I think is the most realistic one out of everything here. And so did alchemy actually work? And gentlemen, could you say if it worked or not? And okay, he had a better, a more nice answer. I said no, of course not. So it didn't work, and what happened? Well, chemistry replaced it, thankfully, in the late 1600s. But good thing though is that, yeah, right. So good thing though is that even though we replaced it, and I've been knocking on alchemy, we actually borrow a lot of their methods. Maybe not like the magic part or the divine intervention part, but we took like a lot of their equipments, their beakers and things like that. So all of these glassware that they use to test their alchemy, we actually use for chemistry now. And so what really is chemistry here, right? Well, chemistry is just the act of rearranging chemical bonds. And so our universe is made out of molecules, and these molecules are made out of atoms. And they are attached to each other by chemical bonds. Whoops. And so if you want to make a new molecule, all you got to do is either break, add, or rearrange the chemical bonds. And so you can think of this as woodworking, right? It's just you have an oak cube here, which is one atom, birch cube here, a second atom, some glue, and if you do some chemistry or some woodworking, you can combine them all together. Let me attempt to, oh my gosh, what just happened? Oh, okay. The other one, yeah, the red one, I'm colorblind, sorry. Okay, so right here, so if you put all of them together, you can create a molecule. If you don't like the molecule, break them all apart into their constituents and make a new molecule, right? And so you're conserving the same atoms or the same cubes, you're just rearranging them with your chemical bond, right? And so if you want to compare, this is completely fine. Rearranging atom, as long as you're rearranging atom, is completely fine. It's valid chemistry. It's valid physics. You see it all the time. Now, what the alchemists were trying to do were a little bit different. They didn't want to create, or they didn't want to break chemical bonds. They didn't even know what chemical bonds were. What they wanted to do was transform a oak cube, the literal identity of an element, into another element. So from lead to gold, or from any metal to gold. And you can't convert the identity of an atom. It's impossible unless you're working with a radioactive atom, or you have a nuclear reactor, or you've witnessed the atomic bomb. And so I basically spent 5 minutes talking to you guys about alchemy, and it's not real. However, I want to convince you guys that maybe it is real within some boundaries here, right? And maybe we can still use it to make drugs today. And so I'm going to tell you guys how that worked. Essentially, well, before we do this, I have to actually tell you guys how drugs work first. And so drugs work by binding to proteins. You have proteins in your body, and sometimes you get a disease, and what happens is that the protein is misbehaving, and it's causing that disease. And so what we do is that we would ingest a drug, and the drug will attach to the protein and will stop the protein from misbehaving. And so the stronger that a drug binds to a protein, the better the drug is at treating the disease. And the key point here is if the drug molecule is not in the correct shape or chemical composition, it will not bind to the protein. And so here is just a simple thing. It's kind of like a puzzle. If this protein only is shaped as a square, then a drug that is shaped as a square can only bind to it. This triangular thing can only bind to triangular shaped proteins and so forth, right? And so when you're trying to create a drug to treat some kind of disease, it's almost like creating it's almost like you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, right? You need to modify this peg so that it can actually fit. And so you start off with this protein here with this circular shape, and you start off with a drug that is a square shape, right? If you do some chemistry or some woodworking, well, you might get something that fits a little bit better, right? And so that's cool and all, but the hole or the cavity inside a protein is far more complicated than inside woodworking. A protein isn't a simple circle or triangle or whatever, octorhombus, diamond. I failed geometry. So essentially, a protein here is, the cavity is very irregular here. And you can see, let's take a step back and appreciate it a little bit. You can see here that there's a deeper pocket in here, right? And then behind this groove, there might be some empty space here. And behind this groove, there might be some empty space here. And this is the binding site or the cavity of the mu opioid receptor, which is inside our bodies. And so in 1959, with Dr. Paul Jensen and his group of scientists, they were able to create a molecule they call fentanyl that was able to fit into this mu opioid receptor here. And so once again, let's appreciate the chemistry they did here. They attach a long appendage here that can go behind the groove of the protein into the empty space, a shorter appendage that can go into this groove, and then they put a bulkier appendage at the back of the pink molecule that can jut into this deeper cavity. So it's almost like sculpting. It's like a really cool piece of work, right? And they did this so beautifully that, in fact, this, of course, is one of the strongest opioids that we know, right? Especially for humans. And this is used across the world in hospitals, especially after surgery and after, and if someone gets a medical emergency. I should know, because I actually got a medical emergency last year, and they gave me fentanyl. And although I appreciate that fentanyl took away the pain, and in fact, it felt absolutely amazing, I would say it is not worth breaking your elbow over. Right? And you should just appreciate the drug for what it can help you with at the hospital setting. And so the key point here, if there was any key point, I was rambling, is that scientists here have hundreds of ideas on how to create a drug to bind better to a protein, right? Because of how irregular the cavity is. But a single modification can take months to create and test. And so this is almost akin to trying to find a needle in a haystack. You're looking through all of these molecules, you're synthesizing them and testing them, and maybe only one of them, you're finally lucky enough to find one that actually fit. And so what if we can speed up this process, right? Instead of doing chemistry in the lab, or in addition to doing chemistry in the lab, we can do some alchemy on the computer, right? To know what kind of drug modifications are more likely to have medicinal effects. What if we have this really nice, nifty computer here where we can take all of the drug ideas we have, including the protein cavity, and just a few days later, this nice magical computer can tell us which ideas are trash, which is mostly most of them, and then which ones are good, right? And so we can do this. But before we talk about some alchemy, let's first talk about how we can create a computer program that actually obeys the physical laws of our universe. And so right here is after many decades of research, we have created a computer program that uses physics to actually model how things behave in our world, right? And here we use this computer program to model how the fentanyl molecule binds to the mu opioid receptor. This is just a quick simulation that I did. I'll just press the space button. So what you can see is that we zoom around, we kind of show how the mu opioid receptor looks like. And it's this long thing. I think it might be transmembrane, I'm not sure. But if you zoom in closer, you see we put in the pink molecule, fentanyl, and then we allow the simulation to run, right? And it kind of wiggles around, right? And so this is cool and all. One of the things that we can learn from this particular simulation is not only does it obey the physics of our reality, but it also shows that fentanyl, of course, binds to the mu opioid receptor. You can see that it wiggles around, but it fits quite perfectly in it, right? So we spent so long, decades, trying to make our physics of our simulation match our reality, but what if we add alchemy into it? What if we make it a little bit more crazy? Let's tweak the physics in our simulation just a little bit, right? And we can introduce alchemy to predict how strongly a drug can bind. And this might sound kind of crazy, but bear with me the next few slides. Let's say that we have a protein here with a binding site, and it's a triangular shape, right? And we don't know which of the three drugs will fit, right? Ooh, so hard, right? Okay, well, what we can do is we can put this into the computer and create what we call a alchemical drug, or what we call a shape-shifting alchemical drug. As the name implies, this drug does not exist in real life, but what it has the magical ability to do is transform into any of the other drugs that it consists of throughout the simulation. And so, if we take this analogy to our system, we once again have our super complicated protein cavity here. we have our original fentanyl, which is the pink, but we have two more modifications of fentanyl. We have the orange fentanyl, which if you guys have a keen eye, you guys will notice that what we've done is we've removed some atoms here, and so it's a bit shorter compared to the pink. And we have the green fentanyl here, where we added some atoms on this side to make it a little bit fatter or a little bit wider, right? And so what do we do? Instead of testing each of them into the lab, synthesizing and testing them in the lab, we put them all together into a computer, mash them up, and create an alchemical fentanyl, which does not exist in real life. Once again, it has the ability to shapeshift between all three fentanyls here in our simulation. And so we call this thing alchemical transformation. That's actually what we refer to it in our field of science. And so the key here is throughout the simulation, right, the drug that appears the most often in the simulation is the strongest binder. And so let's do an exercise to see if you guys understand this. I'm going to show you guys the same simulation, except this time I put in an alchemical fentanyl. So this pink fentanyl here is going to transform into pink, orange, and green. And throughout the simulation, you guys have to keep track and help me find which drug or which color you might see the most often in this simulation. And the one that you see most often is the strongest drug that fits the best, right? And so are you guys ready? All right. All right. And so, which drug appeared the most often in the 12-second simulation? Any takers? Green, of course, yes. And so, if I've actually painstakingly went through the simulation and counted, but yes, 3.5 seconds is the pink. We give it a nice silver medal. This one, very bad fentanyl. We give it not so nice. But then this one lasted the entire 6 seconds, right? And so, good job, fentanyl, or variant of fentanyl. This is the best drug of the three. And in fact, it is so strong of a variant that it's not FDA approved for people. The only use case I can see it used is for elephant tranquilizers. And so, the bottom line here is that proteins have cavities, and we kind of want to plug up these cavities using drugs to stop the proteins from wreaking havoc inside our bodies. But sometimes the proteins are too irregular, and we may have too many drug ideas to come up with. A lab chemist, although bless their heart, they work very hard, they can't synthesize all of these drugs and test them. And so they turn to us, the computer alchemists, which kind of mash everything up, break some laws of physics, and then we can send them back maybe the top 5 drug that we think might work, and they can test it into the lab, and we repeat. And this cycle here, although not perfect, is able to lead to faster drug development as well as lower costs in research. And in fact, alchemical transformation is used in drug campaigns by many pharmaceutical companies. You can see, surely you guys have recognized at least some of these, surely Pfizer and Moderna. And so all of these guys here, including many more, use alchemical transformation to guide how their drugs are being synthesized. And so where do I fit into all of this, right? Although pharmaceutical companies are doing these cool drug synthesis with alchemical transformation, I am once again in the Brooks group, and in this group, we, along with other academic labs, develop state-of-the-art computational methods for drug discovery. And so while pharmaceutical companies are out there discovering drugs, we are the one that built the tools for them. And this isn't to go without saying, and I'm sure I don't need to say this to this audience here, but funding for academic lab is very important, because without us, thank you, because without us and all of the ideas that we have, there won't be any tools to be used for real-world applications. And so maybe one day, through alchemy and computer wizardry, we might actually find the elixir of immortality. Thank you. And thank you. Check out this website if you're interested. This is a little bit more rigorous of a website, but if you want to get deeper into the physics of what we're doing, then it's a simple website to remember. It's www.alchemistry.org, right? All right. Any questions? Awesome.
Just repeat the question in the mic.
Yes, sir.
You're talking about small molecule drugs, right?
Yes, sir.
Does the alchemical technique have any application in large molecules?
Yes. So the gentleman here asked that we have that right now I'm talking about small molecule drugs. Do we have any application for larger molecule drugs? And so there are drugs. This is outside my wheelhouse, but there are drugs that are like peptide drugs, right, which are short protein. And so you're essentially saying, okay, let's plug up this protein with another protein, a smaller one, right? And these ones are definitely much more bigger than small molecule drugs, but we can also do alchemical transformation on them as well. Yes, sir.
This isn't really a question, but this is from the old chemist point of view.
Yep.
You still have to have the chemist in the lab doing experiments with the real stuff
Yep.
to make sure that your models reflect reality.
Yep, exactly. So the gentleman here is putting me back down to baseline, and it is true that even though we have all of these cool technology, what we need to do is actually, at the end of the day, everything here is in the computer, and we need to go back to the chemists, the lab chemists, to actually test everything, because this is just models, and these models are prone to errors. But by synergizing computation with lab chemistry, we can still direct ourselves in a faster way to drug discovery. Yes, sir.
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about, like, when you're running the simulation, does the switching of the drugs have something to do with how it fits the current moment? Like,
Yep.
how do you control how that works? Do you run it multiple times? Like, what are, just speak a little more.
Yes. Okay, I'll try. Okay, so your question here is more on the technical detail, is that during the simulation when the drug is transforming back and forth, is it because it's transforming because it's fitting better to the protein and maybe this other drug appears because it fits better at this time? And is it that we are constantly rerunning simulations, right? And so I'll try not to get too technical, but essentially there is something that controls the ability for the drug to switch between all of the other drug. And this, I'll just call it this thing, basically can feel the protein, right? And so if you run a protein simulation without the drug, you see that it's not static. It actually fluctuates. Sometimes it closes, sometimes it opens, sometimes it closes. You're not going to know, right, until you run the simulation. And so that is true that when we put our alchemical drug in, it actually can sense the environment of the protein, and it's like, oh, the protein's collapsing. That means this smaller drug has to be fit better. And now the protein's opening up. That means this other drug fits better. And so it goes back and forth. And we just run this within one simulation. Yep. One more, anyone? Oh, okay. You.
Okay, so AI is obviously in its like infancy.
Yep.
Do you or your peers see that the AI tools being implemented into your programs more often these days? Is that your plan to do so?
Yes, we know about AI, and it's really cool. And we do have a new postdoc right now working on how to essentially use AI for this type of work that we do here. So, yep. And essentially, it just makes it faster.
All right, thank you so much. That was wonderful. I also loved how quiet the room got when y'all had the assignment to see which color you saw the most. I don't think live has ever been so quiet. But now we can fill it with noise. We're going to take a 10-minute break again. Refill your drink. Be kind to your bartenders. We'll see you back here at 8:10. Nerd Nite is just a great place to be, as y'all know, since you're here. I'd like you to join me in welcoming Rich Reddy. Rich wrote the Book of Ann Arbor, which means he's the perfect person to be telling us about this piece of Ann Arbor history tonight. Rich says he pretty much will introduce himself, and he's my coworker, so I trust him. So I'm going to stop talking and hand the mic over to Rich Reddy. Join me in welcoming him.
All right, thanks, Emily. All right. Just a second. There we go. Okay. My name's Rich Reddy. Wrote the Book of Ann Arbor. Work at the Ann Arbor District Library as the communications and marketing manager. So that's about all you need to know about me. Also, the book was based on a podcast called Ann Arbor Stories. So if you prefer to listen rather than read stuff, you can check that out. Okay, some content warnings, please. First, you're going to hear about traditional marketing. So if there are any people who are really against traditional marketing, you're more of a digital person, apologies, there'll be absolutely no talk of digital marketing tonight. Sexy billboards. We're going to talk a little bit about sexy billboards in this talk about the Billboard Bandits. And then we will talk about, why does it say traditional marketing? That's supposed to say farmer posses. Farmer posses. With that person right there who is holding a giant gourd from 1938, a farmer, truly a person of his time. So first, a celebration of billboards. Look at these billboards from Ann Arbor's past. Weber's. Cigarettes. Oh, look at this. Country needs love too. Flags. The Sequicentennial. We just had the bicentennial. What, the 150? Keep Ann Arbor beautiful. Your child, will she be next? These are my favorite, are the police or highway ones. This is a highway safety ad. This is one that the police wanted. They created this. They paid money for this. Some call him Pig as he makes out with as he's resuscitating a young boy. Come on. Or the library summer game. This is a little more contemporary. That code is inactive. Do not enter it. I also have to talk about ecotage. Now, some of my fonts are a little weird here. I'm going to read off of here. So, rather than give you the Webster's dictionary, it's ecology plus sabotage equals ecotage, or you could call it eco-terrorism, or whatever you'd like. In the past, some examples are the Fox. This was a teacher in the Chicagoland area who used means to plug sewer pipes, to drape smokestacks, to dump sludge on Fortune 500 CEO desks. And after they died, it came to light, a little Walter White-ish, that they were the Fox. They were an eco-terrorist. The ELF. That was, there's an acronym for that I wrote down on this slide to read that I don't remember, but they would take metal spikes and put them in trees, so when the machines came to cut them down, they would be destroyed. They used pipe bombs, a lot of great stuff. And then billboarding. Billboarding was something that was big, and that's what we're going to talk about in like the 70s, where people were sick of billboards, especially along highways, and what they did was they chopped them down. They just chopped them down, and so that's what we're going to talk about with the Billboard Bandits. So, spring 1971. When you go on Google and you search spring 1971, Mick Jagger getting married to Bianca Perez Mora Macias, later Bianca Jagger, and they got married and they were together until 1978. So that's the place and time where we find ourselves. A little history. There was a $20 million billboard penalty levied against the state of Michigan by the federal government after the passage of the Federal Highway Beautification Act of 1965. It took them another 5 years to get their act together to threaten the state that unless they followed these very small rules right here, which included how close a billboard could be to a highway, how big it could be, what it could be for. If the state didn't follow that stuff and work to remove those, they would take $20 million worth of federal aid away, which today is like, they'll just take federal aid away no matter what. So $20 million. The state was not getting its act together, did not have the money to remove all of those billboards. And so somebody stepped in to take it for them. The shrill, biting staccato whine of a chainsaw pierces the cold night air. Thud. Another billboard falls to the ground along a highway in southern Michigan. So that was the lead in an AP story that ran April 7th, 1971. Below the headline, Billboard Bandits Terrorize Highways. So this ran from newspapers from San Francisco to Sarasota, all in the AP. As part of the article, since February 1st, 75 billboards had been cut down around the Ann Arbor area. So we're talking about, let me just get we're talking about 94, 96, US 12, US 14, US 127, and then 23. All around, billboards were falling all over the place. 75 by February 1st. Quote, I imagine it's ecologists, Captain William Holland of the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department said. By the end of this billboard banditry, 167 billboards would fall. 167 chopped down by these eco-terrorists. Not all of them were illegal. So many of these were against the code, against the Beautification Act. Some were actually either for businesses and somehow they fit through, or they were far enough away from the highway and not onerous enough that they were safe. The billboard bandits didn't care. March 1971, police were tipped off to check on a car belonging to an Ann Arbor teen. Now I need to ask right away, just real quick, because the people in this story, they some of them might be alive. Put up your hand if you're a billboard bandit. Okay, I do this for sometimes I give talks about like unsolved murders or things like that, and I like to just check to see if anybody will raise their hand to, I'm glad there are no billboard bandits here, okay. Are you a billboard bandit? Okay. So, first of all, do not fact check me. You dare, do not fact check me. But yeah, afterwards, please, share for afterwards. Okay, you're gonna hear a story, people, about somebody who's in the room. So I'm gonna mind my P's and Q's a little more. February 1971, police tipped to check on a car belonging to a teen, a local teen. In it, they found, what'd they find? Just kidding, hatchet, chainsaw, maps of Washtenaw and Livingston County. Maps, people. They rounded up 6 teens. Were you one of those teens? Okay, so you're one of the ones that they didn't even know about. Okay, 6 teens. And they called them the Billboard Bandits. They thought that they were responsible for 35 of the chopped down billboards. Included in those teens, president of the senior class of Huron High School, member of student council, and the debate team captain. These are 3 nerds, all of them nerds. Yeah, give it up for the nerds. They called themselves the Midnight Skulkers. But the papers called them the Billboard Bandits. They said that they were militant ecologists who wanted to rid the highways of unsightly billboards. Quote, highway advertising is done, man, to the extreme. I'm adding man, like I'm giving this a little. Highway advertising is done to the extremes. It's an insult to drive along and see this blight. We are trying to provoke state officials into doing something they did not seem willing to do otherwise. That's a verbal quote. Man, teens these days, am I right? Meanwhile, while they're being arraigned in court, the billboards are coming down. They're getting chopped left and right. 16 in 3 days at the start of April, 60 in the month of March, chopping down signs owned by everybody. So the businesses, they're not too pleased that some of the legal ones are chopped down. But you know who's more busy, or not more busy, I read that, more pissed off? The farmers. The farmers, and they are gonna get something done, so they form posses. And they protect some of the land, because some of these billboards, what they do is they rent it out to companies, and so they get some revenue. Or, as this person said, these little do-gooder kids, I needed those signs to shave my cows. Direct quote from a local farmer. Late one April night. Mr. and Mrs. Leonard Spooner, they corner a 19-year-old and a 23-year-old in their field. They're hearing noises. And they're carrying, combined, they're carrying a 30-06 Springfield hunting rifle, a shotgun, and a .22 caliber rifle. And they hear noises up by the billboard. And so they sneak up there and they catch some more teens. They catch a 19-year-old Michigan Daily reporter and a 23-year-old freelance photographer who's a Canadian. Brother, we're going to cover Canada a little bit later. They charge them with aiding and abetting malicious destruction of property and aiding and abetting willful or malicious injury. Look at those terrorists chopping down. They weren't actually chopping down. What they were doing was they were on a story to accompany the billboard bandits, and shit went sideways, people. These old folks showed up with more guns than people, showed up and, quote, said, freeze or you get your heads blown off. And so the reporter and the photographer remained while the billboard bandits fled. Were you part of that one? Okay. We'll get to it eventually. 6 billboards that night were hacked down. One, people, $5,000. It's $5,000 of lumber. The other, $2,000. Look at them, charged with it, but dismissed. The judge said, okay, we're going to let them go. However, because the cops couldn't just let them walk, they took away the reporter's press card so that they could no longer go beyond police lines, because they said it was unprofessional that you were escorting these people. Right? May 1971, we're back to our 16s. Here's the quote. The trouble is, I can't take this seriously. It's a farce. A quote from one of the students. Each was fined $150 in the end for chopping down the legit billboard that they chopped down, but it didn't stop. Billboards kept falling. The billboard bandits attacked a 40-foot high, 50-foot long billboard right off of 94 near Ann Arbor Saline. Chopped it down. They kept going. And then that's the end of the story. So that's the end of the bit for the highway part. The highway part of the billboards. But there's more. Were you part of the next bit that I'm going to talk about, which is the Black Velvet Canadian billboard? Okay. Wait, what did you just say? What did you just say? Okay. What I heard was I abhor those guys. And the next bandits are pretty awesome. You'll see. Smash cut winter 1985. Okay, this happened in the summer. It's Live Aid. I just had to pick something to put on here, and you know they ask for the slideshow on Tuesday. Everybody, I don't work to Tuesday deadline. I work to Thursday deadline, and so you get Live Aid for this one. Ann Arbor has its own side ordinances that include billboards and everything else, and you are allowed to have certain billboards in town, and one of the prominent ones is above the Main Street Party Store. So not far from here, above the Main Street Party Store, there's a big spot there. Sometimes it's Plum Market, sometimes it's other stuff. So for 12 years on top of that billboard, the Canadian Black Velvet Whiskey Company leased space to promote their Black Velvet whiskey. What's a Black Velvet whiskey? Okay, I'm gonna shill a little. So first known as Black Label, In 1951, the original distiller wanted to call it black velvet for its velvety smoothness. Velvety smoothness. Get yourself a black label up at the bar after this. I don't think it exists. Here's my pitchman voice. Using crystal clear Canadian water, plus the finest rye grains and corn, Canadian black velvet whiskey is painstakingly distilled, blended at birth, and put up in premium oak barrels to gently mature. So for 12 years, they had the ad campaign up there, and the key part of it, and I'll move forward a little bit, the key part of it was featuring a woman in a black velvety dress. Sometimes they had Telly Savalas. One time they had George Burns. For those of you that are a little older, you'll know who those people were. It's not this, but that was their brand. That was their big selling thing. The tagline was, "Feel the velvet Canadian." That was their big tagline. And apparently it was really popular. I'm going to tell you a bit how much whiskey they sold for this. Ann Arbor had no problems with the whiskey. Ann Arbor loves to drink, but the sexism, this whole thing for 12 years, wasn't going to fly, especially when pioneers of billboard banditry earlier on, 14 years earlier, were cutting down billboards. So at 2:20 a.m. on March 7th, 1985, police were summoned to this area to find out what happened, what was going on with this vandalism. They found a car idling in the parking structure with two women inside covered in black, red, and white paint, this is black, red, and white paint, if you can't tell. They were immediately arrested. They refused to talk, and so they were brought before the magistrate, and they were charged with misdemeanor malicious destruction. Two 21-year-olds. Again, we got the teens and the 20-year-olds. Good job. Good job doing this kind of stuff. In the courtroom, the trial, it was packed. A packed courtroom in which the people who were in there were all screaming about how sexist this was, how stupid this was. And while they were under trial, this thing kept getting hit over and over with people who were vandalizing it. And so the company over and over had to replace it, and there were marches out front and everything else. And so they go before the jury. Here's members of the jury, which I love, that we know. Mother of 8, a gay rights activist, a Lutheran minister, and this, I don't know why they put this in the paper, a guy who had 3 cars stolen in 1 year. He was on the jury. Of these 21-year-olds' peers, he was a peer, apparently. Ultimately, they were fined $180 with 72 hours of community service, and shortly thereafter, after all this, they decided not to continue the billboard, and they replaced it. However, sales skyrocketed. The owner of the party store was quoted as saying, "The idiots messing it up didn't realize it helped our sales. As far as I'm concerned, someone in the crowd was working for Black Velvet." Black Velvet said it was the best advertising campaign they ever did. They went from 170,000 cases sold to 2 million in 12 years. And the Madison Avenue guy who developed this, he said, quote, "I try not to talk to the feminists, being a chauvinist myself." Self-defined. So after all the hubbub, this came down, and then your favorite radio station, WIQB Rock 103. Put up your hand if you're familiar with WIQB Rock 103. Of course you were. That's the billboard that replaced this. And so forevermore, in Ann Arbor, we never had any problems with signs or billboards ever again, and we lived happily ever after. That's it. Thank you very much. I don't have any answers. So like if you have questions, I really don't, compared to our person at the back, I don't really have answers, but I'll take one question. Yes.
Were you implying, like, if the billboard payments had actually cut out all the illegal billboards and just the illegal billboards, they would have been fine?
So the question was, if they cut down only the illegal billboards, am I implying that they would have been fine? For the most part, like not a lot. They were fined $150. The teens were fined $150 because they cut down some like restaurant billboard. The rest of them, because they figured, and I don't know, the state was supposed to cut them down. Technically, they were doing them a favor. Now they weren't hauling everything away, but the billboards forevermore did not stand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich. Alrighty, unfortunately, we got to hightail it out of here. These folks got another event at 9. With that being said, thank you so much for coming out tonight. I have a couple more quick announcements. I'll be quick as I can be. Oh, Lord Jesus. Oh, come on. Oh, Jiminy. April 10th. Our next Nerd Night will be April 10th. If you would like on your way out, please sign up for our emailing list. And if you are feeling kind and if you are feeling able, we got to get these chairs up this damn stairs. So if you are able to, go ahead and fold up your chair for us. That'd be doing us a huge, huge help. Thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. Let's give it a clap it up one more time.